I have a very special guest on my channel. Her name is Bonnie. Bonnie was my advisor back in graduate school. She's done some really fantastic work helping those who are neurodivergent be able to understand and discover their gifts and advocate for them too as well. So welcome to my show, Bonnie.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Glad to see you. And as I've
Yes.
told you, I'm so proud of you. You're just doing great things, and I'm so happy for that. I really am.
I deeply appreciate that, Bonnie. Today, Bonnie wanted to talk about how she uses creativity to be able to support her through the grief process.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, 8 years ago, I lost my husband, and 6 weeks later, my son. So it was a double whammy. And I was just really knocked off my feet. And so at that time, I also had my mother living with me who had dementia. I thought I just needed to retire. I loved my job, but at that point, I just had nothing left to give, I felt. So I retired, and then it's like, what am I going to do with myself, you know?
Right.
So I decided this was a time for me to start expressing my creativity in a different way rather than through research and teaching. And I started taking classes in painting, and I paint, and I started doing a lot more gardening and a lot more cooking, and I write poetry sometimes. So I try to express my creativity in several different ways, and I really got involved in this much more after I retired and had the time. I think grief is so multidimensional, and it's so different for different people, and it depends on who you're grieving and what your relationship was and what your personality is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, in my opinion, losing a child is one of the hardest things. I lost my husband, whom I love dearly, and I miss him every day. But I kind of feel like losing a child is, you feel like you should be able to protect your children. They should outlive you. So I needed to do something because I was sinking in depression, really. I started doing these creative things, taking art classes and painting and cooking and, writing poetry. And I really think, I've thought about this a bit, that some of my creative outlets are to express my grief, and that's the poetry, and some of my painting is to get out my grief, and
Mm.
some of what I do creatively is to escape it, or maybe I should say it's my way of meditating. So when
Wow.
I'm painting or I'm gardening or I'm cooking, I'm totally into that, and I'm not usually thinking so much about my loved ones that I've lost. And so I think creativity has helped me in both ways to express some of the feelings and also to escape
Wow.
sometimes.
That's something that's really powerful because working as a mental health counselor, I realized that emotions are very nuanced and they're
Mhm.
complex, and there's not like this one way to deal with it. Sometimes we need to be able to, as you said, express ourselves. Sometimes we need to kind of move our mind away towards something else or to be able to meditate. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yes, and again, it's so different for everyone. Yesterday, I was with a friend and we were talking, and she had forgotten something and she lost her husband. And so I said, well, they say grief brain really interferes with the thinking process and memory. And she looked at me and she said, well, my husband died 5 years ago. I'm not grieving anymore. And that really surprised me because my husband died 8 years ago. My son died 8 years ago. I am still actively grieving, and I think I will for the rest of my life. And it changes, but I haven't stopped grieving. And I just looked at her. I said, are you kidding? And she said, well, he was 83. He was going to die. And it just surprised me. In a way, maybe, she's not saying she didn't love him, but she has really had a different experience where she's been
Right.
able to move on, and maybe that's a much healthier experience. But for me, it's something, I've talked to other people who grieve. It's a double-edged sword because you don't want to forget the person, but yet the memories can be bittersweet.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everyone grieves in really different ways. And
Right.
as you say, grief is very complex. It has many different emotions
Right.
attached to it.
Well, one of the emotions that I had to deal with was guilt. And I know that's a big part of grief, but especially when it's a child, because you feel like, what did I not do? And I had a lot of guilt. And finally, through therapy, one day I realized it was easier for me to feel guilty than to realize there was nothing I could do. It was not in my hands. You know, I had the most ridiculous things. I was guilty because I didn't breastfeed my son long enough. I did this, I did that. You know, I had all these reasons. And finally, I realized no, you had no control. And it's easier to think if I'd done something. And I think there's guilt in most people's grief and maybe more or less depending on the situation. You know, I have friends whose kids have committed suicide and they have horrible guilt, even though they also probably did whatever they could and it was not in their control.
Right.
But that's a hard thing for people to deal with too, I think. Everybody has some guilt, I think, if someone they love dearly dies. And I've talked to someone, oh, if I had taken them to that doctor instead of this one, that hospital instead of this one, but you do what you can. And you know, if you love the person, you've undoubtedly done the best you could. But it's just another thing you have to deal with. It's just a part of it. And recognizing that is part of it. And I think this is not exactly correct, but it's partly how I think of it. Because my mother died a couple of years after my husband and my son. So I lost my husband, my son, my mother, 3 generations. And I think that when you lose your parents, you lose your past. When you lose your spouse or lover, you lose your present. And when you lose your children, you lose your future.
Mhm.
And so I think they're hard in different ways, you know. But I certainly have not grieved my mother and father as much as I grieved my husband because he would be with me every day and they were elderly. I mean, I was sad that they died, but they were elderly. It was more expected. My husband was only 70, you know, and so it was kind of hard. But the most severe is my son because you don't expect to outlive your children.
Yeah. Well, every relationship is unique, and
Yeah.
as you
Yeah.
mentioned, this difference in generation can cause an impact in how
Yeah.
it's felt. But there's a lot of different factors, so
Sure.
everyone's grief journey
Sure.
and towards each person is in their life is quite different.
Right. Right. I think that's why one thing that helped me a lot is grief groups
Hmm.
because you can find validation in some of your feelings, but also you see different people experience it differently and at different lengths of time and for different reasons. So, really, that's helped me even more than individual therapy for the most part. Grief groups. I was in a grief group and, you know, they end, unfortunately, a lot of them end. So, but we've kept in touch and we're meeting for dinner tomorrow night. So we meet every now and then still. But you wanted
Yeah,
to
that
talk a little more
having
about creativity, I think.
Well, I think there's an
Yeah.
aspect of it that's creative because
Yeah.
creativity is about getting outside of your own box. And when other people are there, that's what happens. And you probably taught me a lot of this too. Like we often associate with a lot making something that is novel, right? But it's
Right.
also like an internal expressive process too, as well. And
Yeah.
so when we're with other people, we experience some sort of creative transformation that takes place.
I think that's right. You know, I was just thinking, I'm in a book club, and one of the members of the book club came up to me last week and she said, there's this book I read. It's really, really good. I wanted to, we suggest books for the year for the book club and we vote on them. And she said, there's a book I want to suggest, but in it, the woman loses her son. And I don't know if that's going to be too hard for you and maybe other people, because there are 3 other people in the book club who've lost a child. And what I said to her is, you know, different people feel differently about this. We read the book Hamnet, which is about a fictionalized account of Shakespeare's son, Hamnet, dying, and the mother. We read the book. It was hard, But for me, it was cathartic.
Hmm.
Now, some of the mothers who've lost kids chose not to read it. But to me, reading sometimes those things, the people's emotions and experiences, helps me.
Hmm.
And we also read the book Lincoln and the Bardo, which is about how much Lincoln grieved about the loss of his son. And again, some people chose not to read it. And I understand that, but for me, it it helps me. Like I read The Year of Magical Thinking. It's about her losing her husband. It's a memoir, and her daughter. That helped me. I don't know. It sounds maybe strange, but I think it's
No.
true for a lot of other people. But
Yeah.
everybody has to find out for themselves.
Yeah, and then also grief, the process of it changes along the way. So there's times when
Right.
we don't want
Right.
to be able to engage in those kind of materials, right? But other
Right.
times it'll be easier to we feel like we're ready. We check in with ourselves. We know we're ready.
That's right. And the author was Joan Didion. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember. Joan Didion wrote The Year of Magical Thinking. One of the people who helped me most, because it was like my son died and my husband, what in the world? And I met a friend of my sister's who lost her husband and both of her children in an airplane accident. And then she got cancer and her sister came to help her, and then her sister died of a heart attack. And she now goes around and gives talks to people at like grief meetings and things. And that helped me so much because I went, okay, if she survived that, I can survive. That's another way I think it helps to see other people, especially people who have been on the road for a while.
Mm, right.
Okay, they've been able to survive, and it was even worse sometimes. And maybe this is bringing up something you might, but one of the things that has helped me a lot is gratitude. And I do get down. I do feel bad. I do sometimes have little pity parties, but I don't live there. I don't let
Mhm.
myself live there. And I do remind myself I am so lucky. I've had a good life. I have a nice home. I have enough food to eat. I live in peace. I'm not living in one of the countries where people are fighting and dying. But also, I feel gratitude for the people in my life, like you, other former students, friends, family. And so I have combined two of my interests, which are painting and gratitude. And I send out a lot of thank you cards to people.
Wow.
I paint and send them out. The expression of gratitude helps me remember that
Mm,
I still have a lot to be thankful for. There are other people who are struggling a lot more than I am. And again, I mean, for some people that helps, for some it doesn't. I had started, I guess, a couple of years ago on Valentine's Day, painting Valentine cards and sending them to people I knew who had lost a spouse or a lover or a partner, whatever. And it grew and grew. Last year, I sent out 26
wow.
cards. I thought, I don't know if I'm going to do this again. This is a lot of painting cards and postage. But I wanted to send cards to people because I think it's hard for people who've lost a lover, and a card to say, you're loved. You're still loved.
Yes.
One person I sent it to thought that I was kind of asking him for a date. So that backfired a little bit, but we worked it out. I let him know he was one of 25 people who got a card saying I loved them. I mean,
That, that's
26
that's
people.
really a wonderful thing to do. Like how grief is something that is really difficult to endure, but you also channel it as creative energy too, as well. I
Yeah,
like how you put it. There's a place to, as you said, to have the pity party. It's not a place to live in. It's a
right,
place to
right.
give space for those emotions, but not to live in it. I liked how you made it into this creative project where you're connecting with others and showing appreciation. There's like this one Valentine's where I
Mhm.
sent a letter to every person,
Oh,
right?
that's
A
nice.
short letter, right?
Yeah,
And it was definitely very tiring. My arm almost fell off, but
yeah,
it does something for yourself to do something like that.
yeah, it does. And I think it can help people too, to do that can help people. So anyway, that's one thing because I was drowning in paintings because I paint a lot, and then it's like, what am I going to do with all of these paintings? And I started doing cards and sending them to people. And I'm painting a calendar for a friend of mine who's in the hospital. She said she's probably going to be in there the rest of her life. So this is a calendar for her for next year. I'll just show you one. This is
I like to see
January
it.
picture. You see?
Wow, look at that. That's
That's
amazing.
January. I like that one.
Yeah, yeah, look at that. It's so beautiful.
I like that one. Some of them aren't as good, but it's a calendar that has watercolor paint on one side and dates that you can fill in. So what happens is if I paint it and I don't like it, too bad. Next time I think I'll get one I can change the sheets. But this is one I did for October. It's Halloween.
Beautiful.
So I'm good. At the end of the year, when I finish this, I'm going to send this to my friend who's well, she's in a home, I guess. I don't know, assisted living or something. And I think that way every month it'll be like telling her hello again, I guess.
I know you're still working on this, but do you want to show the one that you're sending me?
Yeah. This is one I'm doing for Leon. And Leon and I talked, and Leon loves cats. And he remembered, and I'm very touched that you remember, he remembered I like seahorses. So he said, would you paint one for me of a cat and a seahorse? And I went, good. It's not like a cat and a seahorse are ever going to be together somewhere usually, but this is how I conceptualize it. And
Get it
I'm
closer.
working
Yeah.
on it. It's not quite finished, but there's the cat and the seahorse. And to me, I thought it was interesting. Part of what I'm trying to say is you see they're about the same colors,
Hmm.
but it's sort of saying, okay, we're so different, but we're the same too.
Wow, I love it. Yeah.
Even different being obviously different species, different living environments, but the colors are the same. So
It
they're
shows
kind
the
of cool.
value of both too. Now I feel like the cat and you're the
Yeah.
seahorse.
And I'm the seahorse. Yeah. You know why I like seahorses? The males give birth. That's not the only reason. That's not the only reason. I think they're beautiful creatures, but.
Bonnie, I really deeply appreciate you being here and sharing about what you do to heal when it comes to grief. I'm sure people will feel very supported and also inspired by this video. Thank you
Well,
for being on this show.
thank you. And just one last thing to say to anybody who is dealing with grief, and believe me, I'm learning every day. I don't feel like I'm an expert by any means, but I want to share what has helped me. And I think one thing, and people told me, be good to yourself. If there's ever in a time in your life where you need to really be good to yourself, do it if you're in pain. There are so many times for me, I'll go, oh, today's a bad day. I'm going to have a cup of tea and watch an old movie, which is a big treat for me. I'm going to let the dishes in the sink and the clothes in the hamper, and I'm going to sit and watch a movie. And I think we need to be good to ourselves, and that's important. Okay. It was good to see you. It's
Absolutely.
always good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.